It was one of those crisp autumn mornings when the air feels sharp, like the world wants to keep you awake. Daniel Harrington's navy blue Bentley purred down the quiet streets of Willow Creek, the exclusive neighborhood he called home. To the world, Daniel was the man who'd won the game. A millionaire tech entrepreneur, widowed at 36, raising his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, alone. His company's app had been bought out for 8 figures 2 years ago, putting him on magazine covers and in investment panels. The perfect Instagram-ready life, so it seemed. But inside, Daniel's life was hollow. Since his wife's sudden passing in a car accident, the mansion felt like an echo chamber. His days were filled with business calls and polite small talk, but every night he sat in silence at the dinner table, Lily across from him, quietly picking at her food while he scrolled through work emails. They lived together, but not with each other. He loved his daughter deeply, but somewhere in the fog of grief and business success, he had forgotten how to connect. It was a Saturday. Daniel was taking Lily to the city for a father-daughter day, partly out of love, partly out of guilt for how little attention he'd given her lately. At the crowded farmers' market downtown, Lily spotted a booth selling handmade wooden toys. Daniel turned to check his phone, just for a second. When he looked up, she was gone. Panic ripped through him. He scanned the crowd, calling her name, his voice breaking. The market noise drowned him out. His heart hammered so violently he could barely breathe. Every parent's nightmare swallowed him whole in that instant. And then, 30 yards away, he saw her. A woman in her mid-30s, wearing a faded green jacket and jeans, holding Lily in her arms. She wasn't rushing away. She wasn't panicked. She was standing still, near the edge of the crowd, one hand and gently holding Lily's back. Daniel stormed toward them, chest tight with both rage and relief. "Hey!" he barked, his voice trembling. "What are you doing with my daughter?" The woman looked at him, not startled, not guilty, just calm. Lily reached out for her father, but before Daniel could take her, the woman leaned and whispered something into Lily's ear, something that made Lily's small eyes widen, then soften. When Daniel took Lily into his arms, he demanded, "What did you just say to her?" The woman met his gaze steadily. "Something she needed to hear, even if you don't understand it yet." And then she turned and walked into the crowd before he could stop her. Back in the Bentley, Daniel tried to ask Lily about it, but Lily just hugged her stuffed bunny and said, "She told me not to be afraid of the shadows." It didn't make sense, but for the first time in months, Lily seemed lighter. She hummed quietly to herself the whole ride home. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Who was this woman? Why was Lily calmer after that brief encounter? The next morning, he went back to the market, describing her to vendors. Eventually, an elderly fruit seller nodded. "That sounds like Maria. She sells knitted scarves sometimes, but she's been through a lot." Daniel learned Maria lived in the rougher part of town, in a run-down apartment complex. Against his usual instincts, he drove there. Maria's place was small, sparsely furnished. She was surprised to see him, but invited him in. Over tea, she explained, "I recognized your daughter's face, the same fear I used to see in my son's. He died 5 years ago. I wasn't there when he needed me most, and I've been carrying that ever since. When I saw her alone, I just wanted her to know that shadows can't hurt you if you keep walking toward the light." Her voice cracked, but her eyes stayed steady. She wasn't asking for pity. She was simply telling the truth. Daniel noticed the peeling wallpaper, the nearly empty fridge. the worn-out winter coat by the door. Maria worked part-time at a laundromat, barely covering rent. Yet she spoke with a calmness he couldn't understand. She had less than anyone, yet seemed richer in a way he could never buy. Driving home, Daniel's thoughts swirled. He had built walls around himself after losing his wife, avoiding emotional risk, avoiding vulnerability with Lily. This stranger, with nothing material to give, had given his daughter something priceless: comfort, connection, wisdom. And all Daniel had done lately was write checks and attend meetings. The next week, Daniel returned to Maria's building with groceries. She resisted at first, but he insisted. He also quietly paid off her overdue utility bills. He didn't tell her. He wanted her to keep her dignity. Soon, Daniel invited Maria to join them at the park. Lily took to her instantly. They played, laughed, and made up stories about shadow monsters that couldn't survive in the sunlight. For the first time in years, Daniel saw his daughter's face light up, genuinely, fully. One rainy evening, Maria confessed something. Years ago, she'd been a nurse, but after her son's death, grief consumed her, and she spiraled into depression, losing her job and home. She'd clawed her way back, but never regained her old life. "People look at me and see a failure," she said. "But sometimes, losing everything teaches you what matters most." Her words hit Daniel like a blow. He realized he was what people saw: success, wealth, but inside, he had been failing at the most important role of all: being a present father. Daniel began working less, cooking dinner with Lily, reading bedtime stories without rushing. They planted a small garden together, and every so often, Maria visited, becoming a quiet mentor to them both. Months later, Daniel hosted a charity gala. In the middle of his speech about impact, he froze, remembering the day Lily was lost, the whisper, the lesson. He scrapped his prepared remarks and spoke from the heart. "True wealth isn't measured by the balance in your account, but by the light you bring into someone's darkness. I learned that from a stranger who reminded my daughter and me not to be afraid of the shadows." The room fell silent. Some people cried. Donations poured in. Daniel directed half of them to fund a community program for struggling single parents. Maria became the coordinator. One late afternoon, Daniel watched Lily run across the park lawn toward Maria, who caught her in a hug. The sunlight hit them just right. No shadows in sight. Daniel realized the woman who once whispered to his lost child had also whispered to him, without words. She'd taught him that healing doesn't always come from those you expect. And sometimes, the richest people are the ones with the least. As they all walked home together, Lily slipped her small hand into his. "Daddy," she said softly, "the shadows are gone." Daniel smiled, his throat tight. "That's because we're walking toward the light, sweetheart. And we're not walking alone."